Good afternoon. I've never been good in protocol. I would rather consider each one and every one of you as Excellency, as the high regarded person who is with us this afternoon. Second, I usually don't read speeches. I'm very bad at that. So you'll please forgive me when I scramble a little bit, mixing what I'd like to say out of guff and what it is written. But it really, it is an honor to be here with you today for the inaugural WIE conference in Africa. We thank you for have chosen to honor us here in South Africa, here in Cape Town, and we'll take that honor with the consideration it deserves. I'm particularly honored to be in a gathering of such and many inspiring women who span several generations, from all the veterans like myself to the bright, talented, promising young women who have graced this stage today. I'm sorry I was not able to be with you this morning. When I look back at my life and the different journeys I have traveled, I see the Africa of the past, the Africa of the future coming together in the many astonishing changes which we are witnessing today. We stand at a moment in time where the struggles of Africa's past, the struggle to free ourselves from colonial oppression, widespread poverty, illiteracy, gender inequality, poor health, appear to be improving as the promise of Africa's future beckons before us. If I transport myself 40 years back in the early 70s, I see a generation of women at that time who were influenced by the emergence of African nationalism and imbued with the post-independence pride to change the face of this continent in ways that would improve the daily lives of ordinary citizens. Our focus then was building new countries, charting our own destiny as free men and women, and unifying the continent through Pan-African dreams and creation of institutions like the Organization of African Union and others. The 60s and the 70s saw the second wave of feminism sweep the world, with the women's liberation movement occupying a center stage in many parts of the world. But here in Africa, women remained, for the most part, politically and economically marginalized. The struggles we fought then to draw attention to the plight of the African women were, for the most part of it, a struggle simply to have a seat at the table and have a voice, rather than defining the agenda as we women saw it. Still, that generation influenced the shape and the face of African feminism and gave rise to the women we hold in very high regard today, such as President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, President Joyce Banda of Malawi, Wangari Maathai, and leading businesswomen such Tabitha Karanga and Ibukun Awosika, as well as countless others who championed the rights of women and children every chance they got. Sadly, we left behind documented evidence of our struggle, which is something I would plead with young generation to begin to correct. Now, let's come to Africa of today. In 2012, I was asked by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to serve on a high-level panel of eminent persons to advise on the global development framework beyond 2015. Among the issues we were required to address were: 1, what have the Millennium Development Goals achieved? 2, how has the world changed since MDGs were first adopted in 2000? And 3, where do we go from here? I think I'm going to derive from my written speech now. 1, MDGs were conceived to serve and try to meet the challenges of the developing world. They were mostly directed to focus and to overcome some of the most depressing social indicators like child mortality, maternal mortality, the impact of HIV/AIDS, inequality in education, especially for girls, lack of sanitation, and addressing more generally gender equality, and somehow climate change. But it was an agenda which was for the less developed, and the developed world was asked to assist in what was called as the 8th MDG as a partnership. Well, let's recall that MDGs by themselves, they were not even ambitious. For you to decide that you are going to reduce poverty by 2/3, wherever it is on the onset to accept that poverty is to stay with us, is to accept that we don't have the means, institutions, and capacity to overcome poverty. And although we can say there has been some improvement in most of the indicators, the reality today is Africa, South Asia, they are not going to meet even that non-ambitious agenda of MDGs. Which means, regardless of the good intentions and the kind of mobilization which was generated around the MDGs, my understanding is that the world has not yet made the right decision of putting the knowledge which as a human family we have generated, the resources which, as you know, we generate wealth in unprecedented ways. There's a lot of resources in this world. And we do also have a myriad of institutions, you name it, which we put in place to address human needs and human rights. But the reality is the determination and the common purpose of working to give every single citizen of the world an opportunity to live in dignity, that resolve doesn't exist. So that's where we are. It's not a question of knowledge. It's not a question of institutions. It's not a question of resources. It's not a question of capacity. There is no resolve to provide all single citizens of the globe with a life in dignity. So that's where we are. And now let me try and say, where do we go? We, as women. Women in the globe are not yet sitting where the decisions are made. Whether it is at the political level, the highest level of politics, globally, regionally, nationally, whether it is even subnational, in our communities, in our families. How many times we have to juggle and negotiate a decision within our own families of very fundamental things like when a girl has to choose to get married and with the person she loves. When a woman can decide when to have a child and how many children to have. Those decisions in the millions and millions of women are not in their hands. Yet, it's their body and it's their life. So, when we talk of decision-making level, most of the times we put the note at the political and sometimes at the business-wise. That is important. It is important. And actually we can say in the last decades, the landscape has been changing slowly, but it is changing. Women are there. But what has not changed fundamentally is the right to make decisions and to make choices for women. That has not changed fundamentally. So, if you ask me in the next 30 years, if you like to use the benchmark of the UN, the next 15 years or 20, let's say it, I would say women have to connect with one another and make a movement in which we say to ourselves, it is our right. I'm saying it is our right to sit in those places where decisions are made. And if that is so, we have to strategize. How do we get there? How do we occupy that place? It's not in isolation like many times we do. The political people, they try through elections. The business people, they use their own skills and they believe they made it because they are smart enough to have navigated in that world. In science, those who are in our academic institutions, they feel also that, I'm working hard and that's why I'm a renowned researcher and I am whatever I am in a university or a research institution. And then you say, also, those who are in rural areas, who are leaders there, they say, with all the constraints, but I affirm myself as a leader in rural areas or in urban areas, if you like. But women have not discovered that the major weakness they have is not to be connected with one another. and not to recognize that you are not going to do it alone. You have to do it hand in hand with others. So I think one of the challenge of the next 20 years, if you like, is women have to acknowledge that their strengths comes for that interconnectedness in which they feel, whether you are illiterate, whether you are a doctor or with PhD, whether you live in New York or you live in New Delhi or whatever you are facing the same challenges. And we are going to conquer that space of making decisions about our life, about the life of our families, of our communities, of our nation, of the world in which we live in. We'll be only able to do that if we work together and we are connected. So that's the first challenge I leave with you. But more importantly for me, it's not a question of numbers, of having women sitting in boards or sitting in parliaments. It is important. The numbers are important. But more importantly is the transformative leadership which women have to bring to those institutions, to do things differently, to lead with a sense of responsibility and a sense of accountability to those constituencies you represent when you get there. It is the kind of leadership in which you have people's interests at the center of your activities. None of us here would be where we are if it had not been because of the struggles and the triumphs and the defeats and whatever and frustrations of generations and generations of women who came behind us. So we are a result of those struggles. And we can only have the legitimacy to sit in those boards and those political institutions, wherever we are, if we are able to carry with us the millions and the millions of women wherever they are. And that is the transformative leadership I'm thinking about. And we have to challenge ourselves that, yes, we have the right to make decisions about our lives, our communities. We have the right to shape institutions, but we do represent and we are accountable to millions and millions of women around the world. The second challenge I would like to leave with you is whether you are in the UK, just as an example, or Australia, or you are in my village. There is a perception and practice that women are things in the hands of their partners. If we could bring here some of the statistics, I'm talking of gender violence and abuse. There's no one single country which cannot say you don't have very severe violations of women's rights through abuse. Women who are killed in the hands of those who one day they had said eye to eye to say, I love you. And then they turn, they kill them. Look at the statistics in Australia, in the US, in wherever, even here, of course, in our own continent. Women equally, regardless of how qualified, how well positioned they are in institutions they run, they are still being abused. That means to me that the way our societies look at and treat women, it's far from giving the dignity, the identity of a human being. That's why at any moment when something happens, they feel they have the right to kill a woman. And we have to question ourselves, what is it which has to change in the mentality and attitude of men, the way they relate to women? Let me put it the other side, the other way. Some can argue that we allow men to treat us the way they do. Let's accept that that is the case. So, what is it we women have to change to command the respect which will inhibit whoever to think that they have a right to raise their hands against a woman and even to take her life? There is a fundamental societal change which I think we have to begin to address. Because what we call gender violence and the programs we go about the police, and then we want the Attorney General to change laws, all this is important. But that is not the issue. The fundamental issue is, what is it behind that? Why they believe they can take the lives of a person they have ever said they love. I think the other issue I would like us to think in the next 20 years to come is, they say women now command, they are the third biggest market, following to China and India, isn't it? We are the third biggest market. They say our spending capacity goes to trillions. Okay. But who are those women who are commanding those trillions? Are they really the billions of women in the world? The issue I'm bringing here is, while it's important that we have the purchasing capacity and we are being called that very powerful market, what we have to ask ourselves is this the ability and the capacity of the billions of women in the world? What I'm bringing here is the issue of inequality. The huge gap which goes between those who have and those who have not. Millions on this continent alone go hungry every day just to have bread on the table. So when we talk about this, we have to say, yeah, we are in a society which encourages and promotes actually consumerism. Is this the society which we want? Is this the society which we should encourage our children to grow and to try to strive in? How do we introduce in everything we do the sense of equity? I'm saying equity, because equality, you may say, it is not possible in totality, but equity, in which we live in societies which care about one another. And caring, it means to be able to revisit the way you do things and the way you embrace others who may be at your side or may be behind you. But this consumerism which we are being told of, we become very proud of, it's leaving billions behind. And women have to begin to say, is this what we want? When we want to sit at the table, is that the kind of society we want to leave behind for our children and our grandchildren? Let me come to another point. No country in the world can claim that they have achieved equal work, equal pay, from the most developed to the less developed. It is accepted. Although it's illegal, there's no constitution which says it's right to discriminate against women when they do the same kind of work. But the reality is, even the so-called most developed nations, they live with it and they don't feel challenged that, for equal work, you pay less a woman simply because she is a woman. I'm coming back to the fundamental issues of how we are being seen, how we're being treated, and how we somehow become comfortable with that kind of treatment. I'm saying we have the right to challenge that. All women to say, you know what? When you have the qualifications, when you have the expertise, when you are able to perform and produce a certain kind of results, no one has the right to pay you less. And you make it, you women, particularly the young women, you make it a point to get your voice heard to say equal work, equal pay in the next 15, 20 years. I think you can get it, and you need to do it. Because I wouldn't like myself, as I said, I come to that generation where I had to live with some kind of discrimination. I don't want my daughters, let alone to think of my granddaughters, to live in a world where it is acceptable simply because you are a female. Let me bring another example of things which I believe you should deal with. Is, we on this continent mostly, we live with the so-called informal economy. And the informal economy mostly is women. We struggle. We have no access to capital. I have been talking of this for maybe the last 30 years of my life. Access to capital, access to land, access to services. Hey, now, we have to get a deadline for ourselves and to work hard. To say, you know what? I'm told that on this continent, only about 21% of women have access to an account in a formal financial institution. Only 21%. I'll leave with you to discuss and say, what is the benchmark we are going to put to ourselves the next years to come, next 15, 20 years? Women should have access to financial services because they can do business better if they have access to capital. It's not only to have an account. It's to have access to capital, it's to become investors, it's to become entrepreneurs. But we also talk without defining the steps we have to achieve. 2030, come 2035, what is the percentage of women you want to struggle to get them to have a formal access to financial institutions and financial services? And you say, this thing of saying to women that they don't own land, but they cultivate the land. How are we going to move so that in 10 years' time we have to talk in a different level? We can't be talking of the same way as we have been doing. My challenge to you is this called the formal economy has to be transformed using the brains and the talent, the creativity of women in a way we transform those institutions and we use the right to use them properly. That's why we tried, I'm not so sure you are going to be informed about this. When we have the new faces, new voices for us and say, women in finance have to take the lead. They have to define what has to change within financial institutions. But what is it which has to change with the regulators? What has to change with the ministries of finance? And what has to change in the big financial institutions for us to have access to, not only to finance, but to products which serve us better? But this has to change, and we have to have an agenda to get there. I have to move and say, I think also women have to learn to bring others together, particularly those who are very successful. Make it a point for yourself to say, okay, in the next 10 years, at least I have to bring 10 women to the level where I am. And I can make it. And I say 10 years, it means it's one per year. But set for yourself according to your ability and capacity. But you have to define that we need to go for the what I call multiplying faces, amplifying voices, which means you make sure that hundreds of other faces are at the center stage, and you play a role to bring them up. You have to know them, and you have to know by face. This morning, I had a very interesting experience. I was sitting on the plane, a young lady sitting next to me. She was a bit shy at the beginning, and then after takeoff, she says, "Mom, are you the former chancellor of UCT?" And I said, "No, I'm not a former. I'm still chancellor of UCT." And she says, "You know, I will never forget the day you kept me 10 years ago." She says 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you kept me. And I had a distinction. And you gave me the honor to stand. Because I used to do that. Whenever a girl, even young men, someone who graduates with the distinctions, I would pay respect. Instead of capping while I'm sitting, I stand. I take the time to embrace and say, "Well done." And then I said to her, "Don't be shy to fly high." That's what she repeated to me. And she says, "I always kept this in my mind. And now, after what I've done, I went to UCLA, I did my PhD, I'm now a lecturer at WITS, and actually I want to go back to UCT, which is my alma mater." But it was just because I said, not just, but partly because I said to her, "Don't shy to fly high." What I'm saying is an encouragement. I don't know this young lady. I had no imagination that what I was saying could be such an inspiration. But every single one of us here, we have an opportunity to inspire others. And to give them that strength which they need just to spread their wings and fly. Make it a point, if you are considered a successful woman, wherever you are, to help those wings to spread in young generations. And when you come to a certain age of your life, you look back and say, "Yes, I climbed while I was empowering." It sounds a little bit of no modesty, but it was simply because it touched me the way she approached, because it was totally unexpected. But for me, the important thing is, it's not a question of money. It's just for you to take the time to inspire another person, and that person can effectively fly high. Let me finish. We are living in a world of rapid and fundamental transformations. This is going to increase the tensions in our relations with men. The more you empower yourself, tensions can rise. What I'm saying is, now, like the old generation, make sure that your empowerment doesn't enter into contradiction with the harmonious and constructive relationship with others, especially with men, with your brothers, with your partners. I have heard many young people who say, "I have a conflict between my career and family." Family and career have never. They shouldn't. be in a contradiction in which you cannot have healthy relationship with your partner simply because you are being empowered. It means, again, to have the humility of thinking and say, how do I grow? How do I change? But I change those who matter so much to me, particularly those who may become your partner, etc. So I think that's a very important issue in the women's movement. And finally, I want to appeal to you. Let's rewrite the narrative of how we see ourselves and how we want others to see us. But a narrative which is written by ourselves in the terms in which we understand. Other generations will come, will correct, will make it better. But women have to be able to clearly outline how do we see ourselves and how do we want to be seen and how to be treated, as I mentioned before. But the narrative of women's movement has to become much more clear, much more shared among ourselves, and to make it share with those who have to work with us. And this young, very young continent of ours, Africa, and Asia actually, we have more than before brilliant, talented women. I was told that this morning you had some of the most inspiring sessions and how you see young people are flourishing. Let's do that. But let's get these young people to have a much broader vision of how they shape not only our continent as Africa, but they shape the future of human family in 21st century. So young, brilliant, talented as you are, see yourself as the change you want to see in society. And get engaged in a constructive way with all the institutions where you are. And make sure that this 21st century becomes much better than the 20th century. And I have to apologize. I have to leave. And the reason why I disrupted the proceedings of your session is because I have a very compelling reason. I was sitting and having lunch with two friends, and my daughter came in and she said, she took one of them aside, and when they came, I looked at the eyes of the two and says, what happened? And my daughter said, I said, say it, what happened? Is it your brother? She said, no. I said, so who is it? And she said, Uncle Gideon is not too well. I said, tell the truth. Is he gone? And she said, yes. Your brother is gone. And I had to take a few minutes to think, what do I do now? Do I leave? Do I go to? So forgive me. Part of what I would have liked to tell you this afternoon, I didn't say. Because I'm still struggling with my emotions with this. And from here, I have to go to the airport to go back. I'm sorry I can't join you this evening, but I have to go back to Johannesburg. And tomorrow morning, I have to fly to Maputo to bury my brother. I wish you all the very best. All the very, very, very best.
Wow.
Thank you.
Bingo. This is what we call a strong, strong woman. I admire you greatly, and I know all these ladies admire you.
Thank you.
Thank you.